we were not the typical Mennonite Campos, or the Campos Menonitas family, because my dad, long before my time, he decided to make his living driving a truck. He bought this 5-ton truck, and he would go to the States to buy used farm equipment and haul used farm equipment back to Mexico. That was a very lucrative way of making money, an easy way. Well, for him it was the only way that he knew. He had no land, he had really no money other than buying this truck. And so that in the Campos Menonitas was a big no-no in those days. Driving a vehicle with a motor and rubber tires was forbidden. That was worthy of excommunication. So my dad kind of battled with that on and off. My parents moved to the United States for a number of years, and I'm not quite sure exactly when they moved there and when they moved back to Mexico, but I know that I have 2 sisters, one born in 1956 and the other in 1958, that were both born in California. So they were there at least for about 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so then moving back to Mexico, living in the United States was also not a very popular thing to do. In Mennonite culture in Mexico, that was seen as living in a very, very worldly land, in a land where it was almost impossible to be a Christian. Mm-hmm. And so my parents, they weren't going with the flow very well. So before I was born, I know that my family lived for a while right on the outskirts of the city of Cuauhtemoc, which was also a big no-no. They were not in a campo or in a village. And what I remember, so when I remember from when I was around 4 years old, we lived not in a campo either, but on a road that was actually within, I don't know, maybe 3-4 kilometers from Cuauhtemoc. Mm-hmm. And so we just lived along this road where somebody was selling 5-acre lots, and my dad eventually bought one. So I remember from around age 4, we lived in this old adobe brick building that was right behind what in Quinta Lupita became the school and church of the General Conference from Canada. Yeah. They sent missionaries out there and started a school and church in what was known as Quinta Lupita, which was not a Mennonite colony or village. Yeah. And that's basically where I lived in the years that I remember. I don't know if I was born already when my family still lived by the city of Cuauhtemoc, right on the outskirts, among some in a poor area of the city. So distances at that time seemed an awful lot greater than they are now,
for sure,
or than they seem now. But we lived east, and so slowly over time there was a whole mixture. I remember the orchard right behind us, right on the west side of us, was sold by Abraham Peters to a Mexican doctor. Yeah. The lot right to the east of us, that would have been the front of our house, was bought by a young Mexican couple that built a house there and moved in, and they became our neighbors. So we actually had Mexican neighbors on both sides. Yeah. There was a Mexican family that lived at the corner of where the road through Quinta Lupita turned to go to Cuauhtemoc. And so there was Mexicans and Conferenza, or Conference Mennonites. We went to that school and church because another part of the story was that made our story a little bit different, was that my dad abandoned the family, left the family right after we moved into that new place, that new house, when I was 4 years old. Big conflict. He was not living a good life. There was many things that he did that were would have been considered to be grave sins by the church. He was excommunicated for driving a truck according to my mom, as she told me the story, right around the time I was born. So that would have been in 1962. And that excommunication was from the Old Colony Church. So from there on, going to the Old Colony was no longer possible for us. And when my dad left the family for the first years, we had no transportation at all. No car, no horse and buggy, nothing.
Yeah.
And so we went to the school and church that we could walk to. That was a quarter mile away, and they were confidants us. So we were outlaws. I don't know, rebels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we were actually excommunicated out of the Old Colony Church where my dad was, and that kind of kicked us out, and by default ended up confidants, simply because that was within walking distance.